Hi, folks. With Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about and using as a launching pad the election of Zoran Namdani in New York, where a foreign-born communist, race grifter has been elected as the mayor of New York City. But to really point out that all across the Western world this is happening, and at an increasing rate. The mass migration from the third world has brought in a whole bunch of people into the West who have no real concept of democracy, the common good, how wealth creation and taxation works, how sharing within a capitalist wealth creating society is different from the type of sharing resources that goes on in some third world shithole when you're out in the rural areas living in a grass hut. But they bring their attitudes and views and concepts with them. A lot of them have an IQ well below 100, and they're arriving, have been brought in by the globalists. Remember, the local white population never wanted this, never asked for it, never voted for it. So masses of these third world peasants have come in, and they see the world very differently. And even their children and grandchildren have that very different view. In fact, you could even go further than that. Indians, for example, coming from India, 5 or 6 generations Western born, they still behave as an ethnic bloc. They still send back to the village of their ancestors the husbands and brides. They still live in Indian enclaves. They still, will only spend money in Indian businesses if they can. They want to take from the white man, but they certainly don't want to share, and they certainly don't want to give. Now, there's a very small percentage who do. For example, if someone's a surgeon, they're going to operate on anyone that can afford to pay for them. So that could be anybody. So they, indirectly add value to society through those sorts of things. But otherwise, they're just pure parasites, and they vote as a bloc, and they want their own representatives in parliament and in the local councils and in the local cities and the federal parliaments and this sort of thing. They want their own people there to argue for exclusively in unique Indian interests. And there's a recent case in Australia where some of the Indian community heavies thought that they'd been disrespected somehow by a white politician in Australia, and they expected and got those white politicians to come groveling on their fucking hands and knees, begging for an apology from a group of ethnic, very concentrated ethnic folks that have been brought in and think they fucking own the place. But this is really much how it's going. This is going on all over the Western world now. Ethnic groups concentrate in certain areas. That area is an electoral district, and as soon as they get to a threshold of give or take about 30% of the voters, when they achieve that, because they vote so heavily as a bloc for their own candidate, they're already more or less in control of the situation there in terms of electing their own representatives. So if it's a Pakistani group, they're going to make sure a Pakistani gets in there. Excuse me. The job of that Pakistani isn't to represent the country or the district or the whatever. No. The job of that representative is to represent that ethnic group in that area and to argue exclusively and uniquely for those ethnic interests. And you see, so I've gone and looked at some debates and so on where these people turn up. They're not hardly impressive. Some of them barely speak English, for goodness sakes. In England, they're Arabic or Pakistani or Afghani or whatever people getting up, and they're talking in the Pakistani language or Urdu, whatever it is, and waving the Pakistani flag, saying, "I work for Pakistan," and this and that. What? You're in an English parliament, British parliament. What are you doing talking about that? Now, there's no chance someone like that could get elected if there were white voters. And if you look at the votes, the white votes, other than maybe some left-wing college kids or something, but other than a small group, the amount of folks that vote for these people is relatively small. And if only white people were voting, then these folks wouldn't have a snowball's chance of ever holding political office of any description. But masses of Pakistanis have been imported into England, or Indians into Australia, or Arabs, or whatever third world ethnic group you can think of. They've been put in. They've concentrated heavily in an area they're not integrating. They don't want to integrate. They're here to loot the white man's treasury. They're not here in the West for any other reason. They don't want to be here. They don't want to come to a Christian country because they want the Christianity, or they want the white culture, or they're only here so they can loot the treasury in the West. The globalists know that as well. And if you look at assuming the mass migration continues at the rate it is, I mean, wow, in Australia, it's insane for a country this size, the population this size of 26, 27 million, more than 500,000 third world people are being brought in every fucking year to Australia. I was in the city just a couple of days ago in Sydney City, and the amount of times I was the only white person on the train carriage in Sydney, downtown Sydney. The only white person in the train carriage gives you an idea just how far things have gone. So this has changed the whole dynamic of political representation, voting, and so on. The idea is, or was, that people would vote possibly on class lines, but would vote also on policy lines. So the government or the intended representative or the political party had to put forward policies that the people would vote for. Now, these policies had to have some common good. Not that there wasn't a little bit of pork barreling, like we'll build a new football stadium in your area or something. There were things like that went on, but policy played a big role. And I remember certainly as a kid, little kid, adults sitting around the table with their cup of coffee, and I was like playing with my toys in the corner. I was 5, 6 years old, something like that, and listening to them. They were talking about the policies that the government had or was going to have, or proposing, the implications of those policies, and so on and so forth. So this is not how third world people vote. They're voting for their own ethnic interests and nothing else. After that guy was elected, and I'll come back to that in a minute and do a deeper dive on it, but after that Zoran Mondani was elected in New York, there were, and even before or during the election campaign, there were various YouTubers and the like going around New York talking to people from third world countries who'd received citizenship, and that's an issue in itself. Why would you give citizenship to some? I don't understand this. Why would any country want to give citizenship to people who are determined not to integrate, that live in a racial enclave, that barely speak a word of English? Why would you do it? I don't understand that. But anyway, the bar has been lowered and lowered again, and then lowered some more to make sure that pretty much any illiterate peasant from the third world can get citizenship, which means they then get the right to vote, of course. And that's a very concerning issue in itself. But talking to these various people from the third world who are now citizens and thus can vote in the US, or in this case in the New York City mayoral election, what are your concerns? What are your primary concerns? And their concerns were nothing to do with policy as an economic policy or anything that had national implications. Their only concern was they want to bring in their other family members and wider family members. And bear in mind, in these village societies that they come from, your second cousin is a close family member. Your third cousin is. Could anyone in the West, white people in the West, could they even name their third cousin? I doubt it. But to these village societies, your second and third cousin is family. So their only concern, their only thing is that their absolute burning first priority is to be able to bring out their whole wider family, the whole fucking village from the third world, and bring it into the first world country so they too can loot the treasury. That's their burning concern. Is there anything else you're concerned about? I mean, what about the sort of potholes? Nah, fuck the potholes. I just want to bring out my whole family. This is in America what's called chain migration, or in Australia it's called family reunion. Now it's meant to be fairly strictly policed, but when you look at it, depending which year, between 40 and 45% of the total migrant intake into Australia is family reunion. Now, the rules regarding, are you literate? Do you have a qualification? Do you have some sort of employment history? Do you have some sort of capability? Can you speak English? None of those things apply when these folks are being brought in under family reunion or chain migration. So the standard, already very low for migrants, third world migrants, is lowered even more. And it's been purposefully lowered so third world illiterate peasants can make it through the door as migrants, whereas the standard before was, on a relative basis, quite a bit higher. As I've mentioned many times before, if you look at the ship's manifest of migrants coming from coming to Australia, this is they were nearly all from Western Europe. Maybe a few from the Balkans, but pretty much all from Western Europe. And if you go through the manifest, it was a bricklayer, a carpenter, another carpenter, a nurse, nurse's assistant, to first world standard plumber, electrician, another carpenter, and so on and so on. And this was the sort of people that were being brought in before, people that had recognised qualifications, recognised work experience, could speak English, could pretty much walk straight into a job. Now, there were some exceptions. There were, for example, people who may come from, France or Denmark or somewhere like that, and they may not have spoken much English or had much English, but they had recognisable qualifications, such as, the standard, say, for a carpenter, for example, would have been pretty much common throughout Western Europe. So, even these people may not have spoken good English. Now, those sorts of people, too, tended to work very hard to speak English and to be able to fit into the society. This is not how the migrant is today. They want to live in the racial enclave. They want to only speak the language of their homeland. They have no intention at all of integrating or assimilating. They're here to loot the treasury, whether it's through government handouts or something else. Now, coming to the New York situation there. So I just want to highlight that this, Zoran Mandamis, the guy who got elected in New York as the mayor, those sorts of people are being elected everywhere, all over the West. And I would predict, given the rate that they're being elected and how brazen they are about their just their ethnic and sectional interests, then I would estimate over the next 30 to 50 years, white people in parliaments will be a minority. And so people who think they represent the whole country or the entire population, that will be in a minority. So you're just going to have a whole bunch of third world people who are just looking out for their sectional and ethnic interests, and they'll be squabbling over the treasury in a the disbursement of goodies and handouts. They'll be squabbling over that to a level that's never been seen before in the history of it. So the ability of the West to create the wealth in the first place is going to be horribly stunted. And then what wealth is going to be left once all the squabbling over the Indians and the Pakistanis and the Arabs and the fucking Africans and whoever else all squabbling over whatever's left in the treasury, which won't be a whole lot by that time. It's not a very bright or hopeful future. In fact, far from it. Now, coming to Zoran Mandani, now he was up against a couple of very, I thought, unimpressive candidates. He was young, like he's, 35 or something like that. He's young, he was fresh-faced, he's got some very well-rehearsed one-liners. No problem is too small that we will not fight for the people, yeah! We're going to give free transport to everybody, yeah! And he's got some pretty slick one-liners. In the debates that I saw, I thought he was the better. I thought he performed much better than the others. Now, it was slick bullshit one-liners, so I understand that. He didn't come out with real policy. But he launched on a platform that everyone could identify with. Cost of living is too high. That no one's going to dispute that. Rents and mortgages are too high. I mean, in a city all across the West, the local people, their spending power is declining. It's dropping off a cliff. It's declining so quickly. Yet somehow, at the same time, real estate prices are going to the moon. While fewer and fewer people can afford it, the prices are going up, up and up. There's something wrong with that equation. And people like Zoran Mamdani has quite rightly highlighted that as an issue. And it's going to grab people's attention. He says food prices are too high. Yes, they are. Food prices have inflated well beyond, have gone up well beyond, baseline inflation. And there doesn't appear to be any reason for it. Some people say, oh, it's the wages went up. Well, no, I don't buy that. And anyway, wages only make up 10% of the total cost of production. So your costs have actually increased somewhere else. It hasn't been from wages. But have costs actually increased? Are the prices going up because of profiteering? Because of offshoring? What's going on here? And I don't believe it's any natural or organic forces, market forces, that are causing the prices of food to go up. So Mamdani's tapped into that. Everybody feels it. He's talking about now whether his remedies are going to have any worthwhile effect or not. That's a separate issue. But he said, look, these are real problems that you are facing every day, people in New York, and they are. I mean, who can dispute that? Nobody can. It's bald-faced facts. So I thought in the debates, or certainly the highlights that I saw, that Mamdani looked like the more impressive candidate for mayor. If I just arrived from outer space and I was voting on just what I saw at the mayoral debates, I would vote for Mamdani just on that alone. Now his proposals we're going to have free this, free that, and we're going to give this and give that. I doubt that's going to lead to a good place. But nonetheless, the causes of pain that he's highlighting are very much real. Everyone can identify with them. And he says, and by the way, he's the only one who really said, I'm going to do something about it. Now, again, how worthwhile his remedies are, we can debate that. And I think he's going to get stuck in the deep shit on those. Even so, if you're looking at his campaign, it was, I think, the slickest campaign, or the slicker of the three or four candidates, the slicker of the campaign. And Andrew Cuomo looked old and tired and looked like a fuddy-duddy. He had no real ideas. Mamdani came across as the young guy with new ideas, fresh ideas, new ways of dealing with things. And now, most of the people voting for him, especially if you look at something like what close on 40%, I think, of the population of New York is foreign born, and they mostly come from impoverished shithole third world countries, and they see the world very differently. They don't see communism as we do in the West. They have no real concept of that. The places they come from have very little. They're dirt poor, basket case shitholes. They're failed states. So the people who live in these villages live almost as you would in a commune. Not exactly, but they share what they have, and that's how they view the world. They can't imagine a world outside of that. So they come to the United States and they look, or a Western country, they look around and go, wow, you guys have so much. You have so much. Wow, I'm glad I'm here because you will share it with me, just like people would share what they had in my shithole third world basket case country. You will share because you have so much here, so you will share it with me. And that's their attitude and view to things. They don't think, I'm going to go and work hard and bust my head. You've got so much, you're going to share it with me, is how they see it. So, you've got all these buses, you've got this, you've got that, you've got all this food, you've got so and so. Of course you should share it with me, just as they would in my basket case country I've come from. So they go into their commune, speak their language. They can barely speak a word of English, and this is the view they have of the world. So when Mamdani comes out and says, well, I'm going to do this and I'm going to get free this and free so and so, they go, oh, hey, yeah, that's how I see the world as well. Now, young women tend to vote for communist sort of ideas, like say women under the age of late 20s, that sort of thing. So Mamdani did quite well there. But if only white men had been voting, Mamdani wouldn't have had a snowball's chance. So the ethnic voting as a bloc, and Mamdani, again, it was a slick campaign. He did a good job of stitching together all these disaffected migrant groups and saying, well, we're going to stick it up the white guy. We're going to stick it to that fucking white guy. And then he doesn't even have to use words like fascist and Nazis. Man, not that people would understand it anyway, but all he has to do is look at all the stuff the white man's got. He's not sharing it with you. We'll tell you something. I'm going to fucking wait. I'm going to make that white man share with you. And if he doesn't do it, I'm going to give him endless shit. So this resonates with the migrant groups. You're going to steal from the white man, or take from the white. The white man won't share everything he has with me, as happened as used to be how it worked in the countries I came from, where we shared everything. The white man won't share what we have here. So Mamdani's going to make them share it. He's going to give them endless crap of that. And so this resonates with that particular group that sees the world through that sort of lens. But the among other things, the danger here is that this is happening all over the Western world. Sure, New York's a big city, it's in America, and we can be surprised that and I don't think it is that much of a surprise, really, but that Mamdani got up. But again, coming back to the basics, as soon as the non-white, particularly in a particular voting bloc, as soon as the non-white voting bloc gets to around 30%, because they vote 85 to 90% plus for their own ethnic racial candidate, but they'll vote one for their own racial ethnic candidate. They'll vote two for anyone who's not white. So that's the outcome that seems to, or that's how it plays out or tends to play out. And again, these are people that barely speak a word of English, and they've been given citizenship, and they've been in America for 30 years, and they can they speak to the same level of sophistication as a kindergarten child. So this is a warning, I think, for the entire Western world, that unless you're born in that country, and I think the lineage, because again, Indians and Pakistanis and so on, they can 5, 6, 7 generations Western born, and they still, you ask an Indian who's been 5 generations Western born, you're Australian now. No, I'm not. I'm Indian. And they cling desperately to their cultural and ethnic background and origins, and their primary determination is to not not integrate into white society. They want to loot it, take everything they can from it. That's fine, but they don't want to integrate into it. And as this increases around the Western world of mass migration, two things need that. One is you can't hold any public office in the Western world, in any country. I would argue this is the way to go. Any country, unless not only are you born in that country, but you've got your parents, at least one parent and one grandparent have to be also born in the country. And I think, and if that doesn't happen in the Western world, again, within the next 50 years, white people in the white, the hitherto once 99% white parliaments will be in a minority, and they won't be able to make any decisions anymore, because the other people will be squabbling over how they can best loot the treasury. Just talking about New York, I mean, just so 100 years ago, say New York was 99.4% white, and today it's somewhere around 25% white. And that's also a key issue here. White people will, more often than any other group, will vote for the common good. Doesn't mean they all vote for the common good every time. There are class type voting, for example, working class voters and wealthier voters. That you can get those sorts of crossovers, but the amount of people that will vote for policy and the common good amongst white people, because white people naturally, organically grew up in this democratic power sharing. Now, power sharing is not the same as looting the treasury type sharing. So only white people grew up with this or developed this this idea of democracy and the sort of social harmony that we think is necessary for wealth creation and continuity of business and things like that. These things do not exist anywhere else in the world. And so people are coming in en masse to the West. They have no understanding of that. They don't give a shit about it either. You've been fantastic today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.